Imprisoned in the Tower of London, the addled and ailing lady Arbella Stuart began embroidering a pair of gloves. Her jailers may have been confused why she was doing it, until Arbella revealed her heartbreaking reason. Now, Arbella Stuart was born in 1575 into a web of royal connections. Indeed, she was fourth in line to the English throne. Her impressive lineage included being the cousin of James VI of Scotland and the niece of Mary, Queen of Scots. But her family tree also had twisted knots. From the very beginning, Arbella was steeped in scandal. Her parents, Charles, Earl of Lennox, and Elizabeth Cavendish, were both well pedigreed in their own right. So when they married in secret, Queen Elizabeth, was furious. Exactly because they were so well connected, their child would have a strong claim to Elizabeth's throne. A dangerous thing in Tudor England, only just recovering from Protestant and Catholic clashes, and Elizabeth lashed out in a terrifying way. As punishment for the marriage, Elizabeth got vicious revenge. She imprisoned both of Arbella's grandmothers for permitting the union. Even though Arbella's maternal grandmother, Vess of Hardwicke, was one of the Queen's closest confidants, it wasn't a good start for Arbella. And all this before she was even born. All the struggles Arbella's parents led to nothing. In 1576, her father passed from tuberculosis, and the one-year-old Arbella would be the couple's only child. Then came the backlash. As soon as he heard the news, King James VI of Scotland seized her father's lands in Scotland in an attempt to diminish the young girl's political power. Before she even bloomed, still, not everyone stood by silent while this happened. Arbella's paternal grandmother, Margaret Douglas, fought to support her baby granddaughter's legacy through a brilliant PR move. Douglas had a lavish portrait painted of the infant, propped up and wearing a queen's ransom of jewels around her neck and head, complete with a coronet. The message was clear. Little Arbella deserved her gold, jewels, and status. Only then it went from bad to worse. Margaret Douglas had been infant Arbella's fiercest ally, but in 1578 the 62-year-old passed away, and many of her good works crumbled with her. With this death, Queen Elizabeth was the monarch who pounced, confiscating the Lennox estates in England. Arbella wasn't out of diapers yet, and her world and inheritance had fallen apart, but the cruel twists of fate weren't over yet. On January 16, 1582, when Arbella was only 7 years old, her mother Elizabeth passed away at the tragic age of 26, having never remarried. Arbella was now a vulnerable orphan with a huge target on her back, and she had just one person to turn to. With nowhere else for her to turn, Arbella's maternal grandmother, Vess of Hardwicke, took the girl in. Vess may have gotten into trouble over Arbella's parents, but she was still vastly influential in the Tudor court. Wealthy, learned, and sharp as a tack, Vess had survived and thrived so far on her wiles and money marriages. So when young, wide-eyed Arbella came into her care, she was in for something of an education. Under Vess of Hardwicke's tutorage, Arbella received an exceptional education in classical literature, history, and multiple languages, plus a full complement of instruments. One of her tutors may have been the famous poet and playwright Christopher Marlowe, but Vess of Hardwicke wasn't doing all this to give her granddaughter merely courtly accomplishments. She had a bigger goal in mind. Under a different upbringing, it's possible Arbella would have snuck through the Tudor era, laying low despite her pedigree, but that didn't happen. For one, Vess never let her granddaughter forget that she might one day be Queen of England after Elizabeth. Unfortunately, this led to some troubling household habits. Vess spared no expense and saved no modesty for her granddaughter, even instructing the household staff to address Arbella as Your Highness and treat her as royalty. Not only was it liable to spoil Arbella, but these lofty expectations would also later clash with the political realities Arbella faced. Still, Vess made sure she got some practical experience. As a young girl, Arbella was usually kept holed up in her grandmother's house, possibly for her own protection. Occasionally, however, she visited Queen Elizabeth's court. Though these visits were infrequent, they introduced her to the expectations of the court and the comportment of queens. Then again, Vess may have had ulterior motives. Despite her various plots, Vess of Hardwicke was so close to the queen and was parading Arbella around court in part to try to find out who the aging Elizabeth would name as her successor. There was just one problem. Elizabeth wasn't revealing her thoughts on the matter, and so Vess pushed a little harder. Vess of Hardwicke always had her eye on a good match, and when Arbella was 8 years old, she felt the time was right to make her granddaughter a suitable marriage. In 1583, she arranged Arbella's engagement to Lord Denbigh, a 2-year-old boy and son of the Earl of Leicester. This match was meant to secure Arbella's claim to the throne, but it backfired hugely. If Arbella's grandmother intended to get the Queen's attention, she did, but it unfolded in all the wrong ways. Elizabeth was, yet again, furious at the marital machinations, and promptly ordered the Earl of Leicester, Lord Denbigh's father, away from court. More than that, it was a blow to Vess's relationship with the Queen. After all that, Arbella's engagement to the 2-year-old Lord Denbigh came to an end in 1584, when he tragically passed away. Just like her own parents, it was all that turmoil for nothing but a whimper. The early disappointment marked the first of many struggles Arbella faced in her pursuit of marriage, and worse was to come. Arbella's unclear but certainly dangerous rank had always made her position at court awkward. Soon, that position became scandalous. When she was 13, critics accused Arbella of being excessively familiar with the Earl of Essex, a powerful courtier. The rumor gave Queen Elizabeth an excuse to go into overdrive. Queen Elizabeth took the opportunity to banish Arbella from her court. Though this was only temporary, what Elizabeth really wanted was a permanent solution. Two things were now becoming clear to Elizabeth. First, Arbella needed to be married off. Second, her husband needed to be carefully chosen in order to neutralize her power and keep her from threatening Elizabeth's throne. But all this proved to be even more difficult than it seemed. Arbella had a laundry list of potential suitors, but all of them fell through for one reason or another. For years, no one man seemed to hit the exacting criteria people thought Arbella needed in a husband. It was a frustrating position for any young girl, but Arbella was about to get more bad news. Even with the difficulties of her uncertain rank, Arbella had always been considered a natural successor to her cousin Queen Elizabeth. In 1592, that all changed. Elizabeth's political advisers began to push the Queen to drop Arbella, and instead named James VI of Scotland as her heir. It was the beginning of a new phase of Arbella's life, and it was not a happy one. Queen Elizabeth I was now older, and she wasn't just aging. She was also ailing. Without the strength to deal with Arbella's troublesome presence, Elizabeth all but confined her to the stately Hardwicke Hall where her grandmother Bess lived. Elizabeth felt her realm was safer with Arbella out of the picture. Poor Arbella stayed there for nearly a decade, wasting away her early 20s, far from the excitements of court. Eventually, it was too much for her to take. Ironically, Arbella never showed any desire to either usurp or follow Queen Elizabeth as queen. As the years wore on, she developed a different dream. Sick of her confinement and constant surveillance, she began begging for independence from her grandmother. Usually, women of this time did this by marrying, but with no husband materializing, Arbella needed another way out of Hardwicke Hall. Except, when relief did come, it was very short-lived. In 1601, Arbella's guardians agreed at last to let the 25-year-old have her own household and some modicum of independence. It was a brutal catch, though. She would still be on her grandmother Bess of Hardwicke's land, and so still trapped in the gilded cage where she'd grown up. Various, Arbella chose scandal. In Arbella's mind, she had just been playing nice before. Now it was time to bring out the real protest. After years of failed negotiations, she would find herself her own husband. This was scandalous enough, since the queen was supposed to approve of her groom. But who Arbella chose was the biggest shocker of all. In 1602, Arbella put her plot into action. She sent a servant with a secret message over to Edward Seymour, asking him to marry her. The son of the prominent Seymour clan, Edward was, by Arbella's design or not, one of the worst choices she could have made. The Seymours were hostile to Queen Elizabeth and disgraced at court, which is exactly why Arbella's plan fell apart so dramatically. Because the court had constant eyes on the burdensome Seymours, the crown quickly caught and arrested Arbella's servant. At the turn of the century, it became clear that Queen Elizabeth was very near her end, and that King James of Scotland was about to become the monarch of England. For a time, the Royal Privy Council had their hands full, managing the transfer of power, but Arbella just went right on, causing drama. In 1603, Elizabeth finally passed away at the age of 69, and Arbella saw her chance for revenge. She openly refused to attend the funeral on the grounds that the Queen had mistreated her, not shown her proper respect, and had meddled in her affairs. Yet with James becoming James I of England, this could have been a fresh start for Arbella. Unfortunately, there was no clean slate to be had. Arbella and James were cousins, but James distrusted her as much as Queen Elizabeth had, seeing her once more as a potential threat to the throne because of her lineage. Likewise, James also sought to control Arbella's marriage prospects, just as Queen Elizabeth had. Arbella was right back in the same position she always was until there was a new development, and it was disastrous. Shortly after James took throne, Arbella received a ruinous message. Conspirators in the so-called Amain plot wanted to depose James and place Arbella on the throne, and were extending an invitation to the plot. And this is when Arbella surprised everyone. She may have had her issues with King James and his predecessor, but her rebellious streak apparently stopped at treason. When she discovered the plot to put her on the throne, she actually brought the conspiracy to King James. Arbella, meanwhile, made sure to milk her newfound loyalty for all that it was worth. By 1604, Arbella was as close to the crown as she had ever been. When the royal family ceremonially entered London that March, announcing James's reign, Arbella followed the carriage of the Queen Consort Anne of Denmark, along with Anne's maids of honor. It was a clear admission of Arbella's royal lineage, and a nod that she was back in the royal fold. By then she had gotten out of bests of Hardwicke's estate, but the more things change, the more they stay the same. The passing of Queen Elizabeth did not mean the death of Arbella's many proposal woes, but then again, Arbella might have had her eye on someone else. Around 1610, Arbella's eye landed on a new man, William Seymour. Only this was her most ill-advised choice yet. Seymour had his own ties to the throne, and was actually sixth in line, thanks to being the grandson of Lady Catherine Grey, sister of Lady Jane Grey. Given all of this, perhaps it's no surprise that this plan was more doomed than before. Arbella's new suitor was simply too powerful for the crown to give her permission to wed. So, as usual, Arbella conducted her courtship with William in secret. And when people got wind that something was going on with Arbella and William, the pair staunchly denied that they had any understanding. Then Arbella crossed a line she had never crossed before. Arbella finally had enough of playing by other people's rules, and she secretly married William Seymour in 1610. The repercussions were immediate. King James found out about the secret union and seriously began wondering, given their combined lineage, if they were starting a plot to usurp his throne. This time, Arbella didn't get off easy. James saw no other choice than to punish Arbella to the utmost degree, and he first separated the couple, so they couldn't be yet rival heirs, and then he imprisoned them. Arbella went under house arrest under Sir Thomas Parry, while William went to the dreaded Tower of London. But Arbella wasn't about to give up yet. Arbella used the small liberties she had to send out intimate and forbidden messages to her new husband. Once more, her rebellion ended badly. The king discovered the communications, and also may have discovered much more than that. There is some evidence that Arbella and William were doing more than sending letters to each other at this time. They may have been finding ways to secretly meet, and especially risky prospect. Given that King James was terrified of them having children fed up, King James ordered Arbella's transfer into the custody of a different man. But this provided Arbella with a more scandalous opportunity. Just before being transferred, Arbella managed to delay the move by begging off sick. Whether real or not, she and William Seymour took advantage of the extra time to put an escape plan into action. To avoid being noticed that she left her house, Arbella disguised herself as a man. She finally got a bit of luck on her side, and the ruse worked. And as Arbella was slinking out of her manor in disguise, so too was her husband William from the Tower, and they now each took separate journeys to meet. Arbella managed to snag a boat going to Kent, then sailed over to France before her husband, who would catch the next ship to Belgium. That's when it all went wrong. Just as her ship neared the French port, King James's men overtook it. Her enemies foiled her plan, and her capture ended her bid for freedom. Indeed, it ended more than just that. Arbella Stuart had weathered the whims of queens, kings, and suitors aplenty, but she had never been caught in a rebellion this serious. After her capture, King James had her thrown for the first time in the Tower of London rather than a polite house arrest, and Arbella would never see William again. While in the Tower, Arbella seems to have been unable to accept the direness of her circumstances. In the summer of 1610, she embroidered gloves for Anne of Denmark, indicating she hoped to regain favor through the queen consort and kiss her hands again, but nothing was ever able to come of it. And after contracting illness brought on by starvation, she passed away on September 25th in 1615. She was only around 39 years old,